let's get to the reason we're all here tonight. Kintan Brahmbhatt. I'm really excited to host Kintan for the second time here. He has been an Amazon leader for a while. He's currently the founder and general manager of the podcast group there.
Well, Kintan and I will do a little fireside chat now. I love the poker versus chess analogy that you shared. You know, I used to play chess when I was a kid, and then as an adult, I got into poker quite a bit. You know, I know actually one of the poker experts, Annie Duke, has kind of pivoted into just general decision making. She wrote a book called Thinking in Bets. I'm curious, have you read that one? Or
I have, and she has another book as well, How to Decide, which is amazing as well. I think, I was fortunate enough to meet Annie in one of the events, and she's amazing. I mean, I don't know. A lot of my thinking on this has been informed by, reading Annie's work and Daniel Kahneman's work and so on. So, I mean, I'm not quoted everyone appropriately, but yes, a lot of these things are not original. These are essentially things I've found from other folks that have been applicable to product and that have been easily translatable to product building. So my role has been that of an editor here.
No, totally. And I think the thing is, it's what I appreciate, it resonates a lot with me, is just we're doing decision-making under uncertainty, right? And so how do you apply what kind of frameworks and thought process can you apply there? And there are multiple people that have talked about that throughout in different disciplines, but I think tying it together for product people and product teams is kind of the unique lens that I'm getting from your work, which is great. So now one thing, when I studied about poker, I remember one of the things I learned, you can think about expected value of each decision, and you can think about what mistakes you made, and basically some mistakes are much more costly than others, right? And I remember learning that one of the biggest mistakes you can make is at the very end of the hand, when there's a big pot, if you fold the best hand and you had the best hand, that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make versus folding at the beginning of a hand. So when I think about that in the product world, I'm thinking, okay, can we classify different product decisions as far as how costly this one's not that big a deal, this one's costly, and maybe it gets to the high impact, low impact, or one door, two door. But I'm curious, in your experience, what categories or types of product decision mistakes tend to be the ones that are the most costly for product teams?
I think there are two come to mind, and they are either very fundamentally deciding not to enter a market segment just because we are too late. When we launched, I was very fortunate enough to write the press release, the narrative for Prime Music, which became Amazon's streaming music service. When we launched the service, there were 41 or 42 other services, music streaming services in the world. And it was a very real question as to should we really get into this and so on. So so that's one, as to folding a very large opportunity, folding your hand and you have a very large human scale opportunity in front of you. And you obviously don't want to copy and just kind of make a meh product. You need to have your own unique vantage point and unique value proposition. Yeah. And as we were looking at it, as I said, as I was alluding to it, we thought that we genuinely believed, and thankfully, it has turned out to be true, that customers are going to want to listen to music in very unique ways, especially search for music and ask for music by using their voice. And it was hard. It's going to be hard to make it make it right, because you gotta create new index for songs and so on. And the bet was that if we invest in it and make a compelling customer experience, customers would use us. But I've seen many teams not enter very large market segments with large problems when they see, they kind of prematurely assume that the problems have been solved by others.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's basically the parallel in poker would be like not sitting down to even play in a good game. You could have won some money.
Yeah.
There's someone else. Yeah. There's someone else who's got a huge stack of chips, and you're like, I'm not going to play in that game. But and it's funny because I think one of the things you touched on is a large market is the market, especially how big is it now and what's the growth rate? And I think a lot of these markets, they're not necessarily zero-sum games. They're so big and they're growing so fast that there actually end up being multiple segments or niches that people can get in there, that each one is lucrative. So I think that's super, super interesting. And it's funny that you mentioned 41st mover. So I used to work at Intuit on Quicken. And when there's a famous story that when they launched, there were already 46 other personal finance packages out there. So they joke, in business school, we learn about first mover advantage. They joke about 47th mover advantage. So I think the key is what you said is there some underserved opportunity that's out there? And if you can identify it, then there might be a chance to create value. So that's awesome. Cool. And then, I love how you mentioned first principles. You hear that buzzing around a bit more on Twitter and online. Elon Musk is talking about that. And I like that idea and it resonates with me, but like having looked around, I haven't really found a definitive body of work on that topic. So I'm just kidding. We don't need to like formally define it. I'm just curious, what does it mean to you and how would you explain first principles thinking to somebody?
I think first principles thinking is really going after the core, the fundamental things that do not change. The lens I've used is what's not going to change. So for a content service, things that are not going to change, regardless of whether it's it's in the metaverse or it's in the non-metaverse. Let's say people are still gonna want a large variety of content. They're still gonna want premium content, as well as they will, like, some customers who want to create their content. People would still want personalization. So things that are not going to change are the first principles, are proxies for first principles.
Got
it. That's how I look at it. In terms of like theoretically, I explained, I was asking those questions myself. So I said, okay, what is decision? And decision is essentially a bet. And I think that's how I look at it from a first principle. And then is it any kind of bet? No, it's for product. It's a bet that's taking two dimensions into account. One dimension is time, and the other dimension is this uncertainty of you don't control what your competitors are going to do or what the market's going to do. So it's really focusing on laws of physics or fundamentals that are less likely to change.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So it's almost like the constants in the equation kind of thing as you analyze the causality. Nice. Cool. Okay. And then I really like, the whole detective journalist, like the focus on decision making, whereas you're trying to define and create a product, you're really trying to be methodical in how you identify the uncertainties and try to reduce them. Right. It seems like the approach, like a detective, and it kind of makes me think of the scientific method a little bit. And so I'm just curious, like, then the challenge becomes, okay, how does a product team identify the relevant uncertainties? So I'm curious, what advice do you have for teams that are like, okay, I embrace this way of thinking. What advice for how to identify what are the relevant uncertainties that we should be considering?
I use the analogy of using risk as currency, as money, if I say. So I tell my teams that, hey, you have $100 worth of risk on this feature. And let's figure out, out of all these N risks that you identified, how much money how much points, how much money are you going to spend on each risk? So say, hey, there is a risk around technical readiness of some personalization algorithm. So I'm going to put $20 on that risk. I'm going to put, ability to hire on time. I'm going to put $5 on that risk. So it's really taking risk. You have to take risk to innovate, but really using the format of uncertainty is a constant, and then using the format of risks or some analogy that's easily quantifiable. It doesn't matter whether it's 100 or 20, as long as it's relatively right. The team can understand that, hey, you're putting 20% of your risk capital on this, so that means that you cannot take risk on some other area.
Right. Got it. And have you seen? I was curious if you've seen teams like be really good about like officially, because another part of it is like Google's really big about writing things down. So I'm curious if like people combine those two things, like, hey, we're actually like writing down and tracking our risks.
I think throughout the project, I've not seen many teams be very diligent about, but one thing I've seen more and more teams being super diligent about is like just before launch, like a month before launch and after launch. So creating the feedback loops through, we call it pre-mortems. So the opposite of retrospective. A month before launch. At that time, we'll kind of really document all the risks around, hey, are there other services being launched? What's the uptime going to be? Is there any other aspect that could go awry? Do we know any known other announcements from a PR readiness perspective and so on? So we document those, and then we kind of use that to manage against those. And then we do retrospective. We compare a postmortem or retrospective. We compare what risks we had identified prior to launch and use that as a feedback loop for future launches. So I think that tail end of the product's life cycle is where I've seen documentation of risk being quite diligently done, not throughout the product life cycle.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. The pre-mortem, I've heard about that once before. That sounds pretty cool. Awesome. Cool. And I really like the one-way door, two-way door, analogy. And something resonated maybe that you said is that one of the biggest mistakes is what I heard from you, or what made sense, was like when there's a two-way door and people act like it's like, and I think it's another bias of consistency bias. So we just keep going in the same direction that we're going, that they don't stop and say, you know what, this actually is a two-way door. We don't have to keep going if we didn't get the outcome that we want. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts more about, like, how do we help teams like realize that, and not just keep going down the direction and pounding against the wall,
Yeah, I really, I think the most common is you launch a feature and it's used by 10% of your users, or like a small percentage of your users over years. So there's some users. Oftentimes that could be a vocal minority of users. They're very vocal, but it's a small, some minority. And that it's not going to really change the trajectory of the product or the trajectory of the business. So you don't kind of invest as much resources on it. So that you're not going to be world-class on that feature. That it's not going to really matter to most of your customers, but you're afraid to shut it down or turn it down just because there's still a small percentage of users who are using it and they are the vocal minority. So as a product leader, understanding and knowing that, yes, that's a two-way door decision, and you can actually take a two-way door decision by deprecating a feature. I think that's something that I've seen not many teams do. I think Google does a great job of publicly doing it, and they have the feature graveyard or the product graveyard. I wish they also published the memo behind the decision as well, but just for the community. But I think that's good discipline, because like a product or a feature was built at a certain time frame based on the needs of a certain customer set. Now target customer segments evolve, their own needs evolve, what technology can do evolve. So if we kind of keep on having mediocre features that don't quite move the needle, it may not do any justice to either the customers or the broader teams.
Yeah, no, it's almost like the middling outcome is the worst. If like nobody uses it, you're going to kill it. You're going to be like, okay, that was a horror. We completely botched that. And then if it's like, if it's successful, you're going to keep it. It's more like there's some people kind of getting some value out of it. Let's try to keep improving, you know what I mean? Like that's where you see, it's like we launched these 3 features, we got 10% usage. Let's try to add another feature, and just whereas I think it's really more what you're saying is it's about, did we target the right customers? Did we target the right problems? And what was it's funny because you said that you like to see the memos. I bet most of those products don't even have a memo. They're not like Amazon, man. They don't, the number of.
That's very, very, very smart. I know many friends and very, very sharp folks. They're very, very smart.
I mean, they probably did, but I'm just saying the number of product decisions that get made in the world every single day that are not written down or done the way, Amazon does it is huge. So, and I think that for all those hypotheses, there's an uncertainty band and an accuracy of how good are you doing, right? And so, I think a lot of these products fail not for poor execution, but like kind of going after the wrong target, if you will. So, okay, let's talk about the writing thing. I know Amazon is known for its focus on creating written documents to help make product decisions, which I think is great. Actually, it's funny because my first job after college, I worked on nuclear submarine design in a place where we had 100% focus on everything was in writing, because we were had to do these letters to contractors. And actually the guy that started it, Admiral Hyman Rickover, has a quote where he said, "Nothing so sharpens a thought process as writing down one's arguments." And he said, "Weaknesses overlooked in oral discussion become painfully obvious on the written page." So he was a firm believer, like Bezos, about writing things down. In fact, I have a good friend who worked there with me who works at Amazon. He says it totally reminds him of where we work to work. So I think a lot of people are familiar with it. Let's say there are people that are working at another company like, hey, you know what? That sounds like a good approach. I want to do that. I can imagine they could run into some resistance with their peers about, hey, why are we going to shift to doing more writing? So I'm wondering what advice you would give to them to, trying to get their company or team on board with trying to be more rigorous about documenting things.
Yeah, I'd start by saying that mileage may vary. So I know writing is not for everyone. I think it is. I've not found a more effective method to kind of come up with ideas and crystallizing the thoughts. So it has definitely worked for me, but it may not work in different setups. The starting point would be to just ensure that you start, as you're building a new feature, you at least write it down for yourself. You don't need to kind of share it with others. You just write it down with yourself. It helps you clarify your thoughts. And, once you have a good, well-written narrative, you can repurpose it. Somebody has a question about something, you can copy and paste it in the email or Slack or wherever. Somebody wants a quick summary, there you go, take a couple paragraphs and give it to them. So once you write everything down, it's very easy to kind of repurpose and use it. And then once you start doing it and sharing it with your stakeholders, it may take time, but eventually, they'll get to like it. If you like it and if you kind of put in the right effort, I think, people always appreciate clarity of what they are building. So I'm a huge believer of it. And then there's no way where, if you spend time to write 5-6 pages of full sentences, not bullet points on a slide, but full sentences, that you don't have clarity about what you're building. It kind of enforces clarity of thought.
I agree. Yeah, no, and I actually love that. It's like, hey, even for yourself, write it down for yourself, because it's almost like you're doing the first iteration with yourself. And
exactly.
That's awesome. Cool. Awesome, Ken. Well, great. Well, thanks for chatting with me about those topics. Let's transition to the audience Q&A. So we have several questions. So what I like to do is bring the person up here on the stage. That's why we do this as a meeting instead of a webinar, so we can see everybody. So Abby has a question, so I'm going to ask her to unmute. If you want to unmute and pop your video on, if you're comfortable with that, I'll throw you on here. So you can ask your question of Kintan. There's Abby. Hold on, let me get you in here.
Hi, Abby.
Hi, guys.
Let me get you in here. All right, great. Go for it, Abby.
Cool. I'm in New Zealand, so it's daytime and it's quite hot outside. I work more with mature products, and I was really interested to see the press release and FAQs and visual. And it seemed in your chat that it was mainly skewed to new products, but I think I can see value in, setting context on some of our key optimizations as well. And I was just wondering, what are your thoughts around that and how you might use it in a more mature product area?
Yeah, totally. No, it's not just for new products. It's for existing products. It's for revisions to existing products. And I'd say it's not just for products. I know we were moving offices one day, and one of our EAs, one of our assistants, she actually wrote a 6-pager on the whole office move experience. So it's just a narrative that describes the vision, describes what could be the resistance from that change. And she had really good examples of how is the seating plan going to be like, and why have certain seating decisions being made in a certain way? I'm talking about pre-pandemic world when we had the offices. But so, the answer to your question is no, it's not just for new products. I was just using that as an example. But for AutoRip, the example I shared, right after that, we ended up launching AutoRip for vinyls. So not just CDs, but vinyls. And, there was the kind of addition to the existing product or existing feature, and that worked out really well as well. And there was a separate PR and an FAQ for vinyl as well.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome, Abby, great to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Cool, next question is from Aaron Kohler. Aaron, I'm gonna there you're on it.
Hello.
Look at that.
Hey.
Let me get you in here.
Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the great talk. I really enjoyed it. My question is kind of a follow-up related to, how you pointed out that there's limited time and resources to make decisions. And a challenge that I've had is just knowing when enough is enough. And, you can always do more, but at some point, that's definitely the wrong move. So have you found any heuristics or tactics helpful in making that determination?
Yeah. And there's always this dilemma of exploring versus exploiting, and at what time do you start exploiting. Oftentimes, you kind of know that that's where it's a product building is about, timing is a dimension in making the decisions and making a bet on uncertainty over time. A heuristic that I've found useful is oftentimes I know when to stop when I start hearing the same things over and over again. So when the same themes are coming up from across various customer conversations, the metrics are kind of indicating one thing, and so on. So I'll give you a quick example. Earlier in my career, I worked on a product called X-Ray. If you've seen Prime Video, it'll tell you, who's on the screen at what time. You can press a pause button or so on, it'll tell you, so that's call it X-ray. And we're doing generative customer research. And when I looked at, I was working on IMDb. When I looked at the usage data of IMDb, from the metrics perspective, I knew that customers were pulling out the IMDb app around prime time. So while they were watching movies or while they were watching something on TV. When we talk to customers as to, hey, while you're watching movies, what's your most common curiosity while watching? And they'll say, hey, it's very simple, who's that actor? Where else have I seen that actress? So when you start hearing the same things over and over again across multiple sources, listening posts is kind of the time when you have conviction. It doesn't quite always happen that way. And that's why you have forcing functions of the product timelines and so on. But generally, that's the heuristic that I've seen work when things start to converge.
Thank you.
Awesome, Aaron, thanks for your question. Appreciate it. Okay, next up, we have Braden. Braden, if you could, I'll ask you to unmute and you can start your video. Get you up here on stage.
Hey.
There we go. All right, let me get you on here. Welcome, Braden.
How you doing? I'm sure this is a loaded question, but I was just wondering if you have any suggestions of how you go about if your business vision isn't quite aligned with what your customers are wanting or needing. How do you go about that?
What's an example of that? Because I think I have not found myself in that situation very candidly. But give me an example. Maybe I'm not understanding the question.
So try not to go into too many details, but we have a vision with our product that to help our customers with controls. I work in the water industry, and a lot of our customers are saying we don't want to do controls. We want to just analyze our data. But management is convinced this is something that that they're going to want. But right now they're saying, no, I don't want that. It's too risky. The security, they just want to analyze data.
Got it. Yeah, I see. In that case, what you're saying is the solution, there may be alignment at the problem level, but they may not be alignment at the solution level with the customers. So customers may not want controls. I'm just repeating what you said, but they may still want the end outcome. So in that case, the customers, the question not the question, but the things to work on or the research on would be, hey, look, are we aligned on the solution or the vision that we are going after? I would use the DVF greater than R piece, obviously, on both sides. But say, hey, look, this is the vision of the solution because you are dissatisfied. And look, we think the first step to get there is controls, if that's true. If that's not true, then yes, but I'll use that formula to try to get to that change, and do the same for the business vision as well. That, hey, seems like, look, our vision is to kind of get to this end stage with customers, but seems like the resistance will be much higher if we go with the controls first before we can address the security issue. I'm making it up, but you get the idea. But I would use the DVF greater than R formula for that to kind of craft your message and see if that works. Again, mileage may vary, based on the context and the incentives and so on. If that helps, yeah.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, welcome.
All right, Braden, thanks for your question there. All right, cool. All right, next up we have Valerie. Let's see, Valerie, if you wanna, she's ready. All right, let me get you in here. All right, welcome, Valerie.
Thank you. So I'm wondering if you're, and this may be very common with startups. So you're small, you're trying to move fast. The culture and the nature of the work is such that they're very resistant to documentation and sort of documenting their decisions and why, especially when it comes from even the leadership. So if the leadership is not of that mind, how do you convince them? How do you even do it? Because if they're not driving it downward, that requirement, it's almost near impossible to enforce or try.
Yeah, I think it's a very common thing, especially in fast-moving startups, fast-moving companies, where the myth may be that if you spend time on writing something up and documenting things up, then you're moving too slowly. it may be true when you're approaching something on a time horizon of 2 months or 3 months. But when you look at it, when you take a step back and when you look at it as over a time horizon of 1 year or throughout the product life cycle, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or 6 months, the risk premium of having things documented and having all the decisions considered is the risk premium is quite low. So the effort, if you look at it, whenever I advise several startups, and I get this question a lot. And yes, if you look at it, hey, I have 1 month to get this feature done, and if I spend 1 week into documenting, then I'm wasting time. That's the question I've gotten a lot of times. And say, yeah, if you look at it from a 1 month perspective, you're right. But guess what? You're building this feature, you're building this product over a 2 year horizon. The product's this is just V1, you'll have V2, V3, at least a 2 year product. And then it's 2 weeks, for a 2 year decision, value is greater if you make it a considered decision, so that it's easier to communicate. You can look at, hey, every time somebody has to, over those 2 years, communicate, somebody has questions about it, new people join. If there's a documentation for that feature and the decision, then you can easily reuse it, as opposed to having to explain it to new folks over and over again. So it varies from team to team, but the high order bit here is to shift the focus from it being a point in time, 1 month kind of thing or 2 month kind of thing, to, hey, on a time horizon of 2 years, which is what we hope this feature would last for at least, or 5 years, whatever the long. This is the right thing to do. At least that's how I've approached it.
So more of a feature versus product kind of thinking.
Not a feature. Even for the feature would also will have a V2, V3 as well, right? Not just the product. So, and the key is look, the documentation is not used just for building the feature, but also for communicating it, for training folks and so on. So you want to have a system of record of what's being built and why, so that it can be easily communicated to everyone in the company.
Okay.
Even in future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thanks, Valerie. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's interesting because you hear that a lot, whether it's, we don't have time to do user testing or to do user design. People cut corners using time as an argument. And it's just funny because it's like, there's so much uncertainty when you're trying to create or define a new product or feature that the chance of getting it right, it's like throwing spaghetti at a wall. Like, you're not going to get it right if you just kind of randomly roll the dice, right? Like poker, any 2 cards you get, they're usually bad. Right. So it's funny. I to your point, I think it's worth investing in. All right, cool. Let's get our last question in here of the night. Thank you. We have Adrian Houchin. Adrian, I'm going to ask you to unmute and start your video if you could. And so we can get you up here. Excellent. Oh, there's Adrian. Hey. Let me get you on here 1 sec. All right, there you go. Go for it.
Well, hi. Does the one-way, two-way door process also apply when you're shutting down or end-of-lifing a feature? And if so, can you give an example of how that looks?
Yeah. I mean, typically shutting down a feature is a type of one-way door decision for those customers, right? Especially customers. So you want to look at it from a perspective of what's the downstream impact. It's a considered decision. Depending on the magnitude of the feature and magnitude of the usage, if it's used by, as I said, it's used by a small minority, then you want to look at, hey, how vocal that minority is, how deep is going to be the pain for that feature not being existing. What alternate options are you giving to those customers? So shutting down a feature is by definition a one-way door decision, in my opinion. Yeah, you can always turn it back on, but in most cases that doesn't happen. So shutting down a feature is more of now. Yeah, you can do a small experiment where you're doing an experiment on 2% of your users, and you can kind of do an A/B test and they can turn it off. That's different. But if there's a product out there, especially if it's something people are paying for, and then you take it away, that's a one-way door decision, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Does that give you some thinking points on that question?
That's right. Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, cool. Great, awesome, cool. Yeah, and it makes me think one last question is just, what percentage of decisions tend to fall in one or the other? Like, are there a lot of one-door decisions? Or is it mainly two-door? Like, what, in your experience, like what
Yeah,
and across your 4
5%.
quadrants, you have those 4 quadrants. Yeah, you have those 4 quadrants. Like, what's the rough distribution that you've seen? Yeah.
I think the top 5, the top right is in a year, I have found myself make like 1 or 2 one-way door decisions of meaningful impact. So I'd probably say like 5% is in the top right quadrant, one-way door with high impact. And almost everything else is either a two-way door decision with a high impact or a two-way door decision with a low impact. Besides experiments that can be easily turned off, there are fewer one-way door decisions with low impact. The one-way door decisions tend to be the ones with high impact in most cases. But there are many two-way door decisions, especially the ones with a very high impact outcome. They appear like one-way door decision. And that's where it's important to kind of break it down into smaller decisions to really understand that, is it really a reversible decision or irreversible decision?
Got it. Cool. Awesome, Kintan. Well, thank you so much for sharing your advice on how to make high quality product decisions with us. Really appreciate it. I know a lot of people are going to be excited to watch the video of your talk and the Q&A. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me weigh in, and thanks everyone for participation. So I appreciate your time.